Welcome to the Live Fully with Kratom podcast. I'm ETHA co-founder Alexander, and this morning I have the honor of speaking with our special guest, who is a biologic holistic dentist, author, speaker, and health and wellness advocate, Dr. Michelle Jorgensen. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. Today, we are going to talk about Dr. Michelle's personal journey involving heavy metal mercury poisoning and her path to natural healing and living well. Let's get started. So I think, as most of our listeners know, I have a degenerating disc in my lower back that causes some severe pain. And in my health journey, I found a botanical called Kratom. So Kratom is a jungle botanical that has a unique active alkaloids. And when I consume Kratom, my pain goes from a debilitating 9 or a 10 down to a 2 or a 3. And I also get this nice boost of mood and energy. And ultimately, Kratom allows me to get back to living the life that I enjoy. So I can travel again, I can mountain bike, and importantly, I can also continue my exercises, physical therapy, breath work, yoga practices that really, help me manage my health in natural ways. But unfortunately, in today's world, our environment is really contaminated with a lot of heavy metals, and this includes the soils and earth that our plants grow in. And because I consume kratom and other natural botanicals and supplements, I've been worried about, this increased exposure to heavy metals and how this might be affecting me and what I can do about it. And so, Dr. Michelle, I was really drawn to your personal story about how your job gave you mercury poisoning. Can you kind of tell me more about that and what you learned from it?
Yeah, so I'm a dentist, and when I started in dentistry, my father's a dentist as well. He's still practicing in his 70s, and I just thought that that's exactly how my career would go. I just keep doing it forever. And that's not how it went, actually. At about 10 years in, I started to get really sick. And I didn't know what it was. And anytime you get sick, I mean, sounds like you've had your own health journey as well. You start just seeing doctor after doctor, looking for answers. And sometimes they don't have answers. And that's the story that I had as well. They didn't have answers. And my symptoms were I had terrible gut issues. I almost couldn't even drink water sometimes without pain. So, gut
Mhm.
issues, just majorly. I had memory problems. I couldn't complete sentences. I couldn't remember patients' names from room to room. But my big one was numbness in my hands. And it was just painful numbness, not just, numb, you can't feel it, but the pins and needles kind of, oh my gosh, that hurts so bad kind of numbness. Can't move my hands. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't blow dry my hair or use a pen. And I stopped being able to use my instruments very well. And so I didn't know how I was even going to continue, doing my career, doing dentistry. So I actually put my practice for sale. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was in my mid 30s, 4 young kids. This was the livelihood for our home. My husband worked for the practice as well. So we were in pretty desperate straits here. And I'd been everywhere. Obviously, I'd been trained inside of the medical, the modern medical model. And so I'd been everywhere I could think of. I was doing chiropractic visits 2 and 3 times a week and massage 2 and 3 times a week. And, nothing was really changing things. And so in this journey of what am I going to do with the rest of my life and how am I going to feed my family, kind of desperate measures here, I found another practitioner who said, your symptoms sound a lot like mine. Have you looked into mercury poisoning at all? And now I knew, in dental school, they told us that silver fillings are 50% mercury. So I knew that. But they'd also told us that they're completely safe. And if you told somebody that it could affect their health, that you would actually lose your license. So that's the only thing I knew about mercury and dental fillings. And I said, well, I don't have any fillings. And he said, no, it's not the ones you have. It's the ones you've been
Mm.
pulling out for the last decade. Because as you drill them out, it releases the mercury, it vaporizes. And where do vapors go? They go up. Where's the dentist's head? Right up at the patient's mouth. So I had never heard this before. No one had ever said this to me in dentistry at all. This could be a concern, for a dentist. But he said, well, what do you have to lose? You've done every other test. Why don't you test this as well? So I got tested for mercury, and that's what it was, mercury toxicity off the charts. So
Wow.
when I found that out, I was a mix of furious, like, why in the world have I never heard this before? And relief, okay, thankfully, at least I have an answer. But that was just the beginning. And then I had to try to figure out what to do about it. And that's kind of what you sounds like, where you're at as well. Okay, so if you do get these mercury, or heavy metals, whatever it might be, what do you do about it? And that's where I was. The doctor just said, well, you can't keep putting it in if you're going to get it out. That's the first step. You have to be able to make sure that you're not getting more in. So he said, well, if you're going to be a dentist, you have to figure out, is there a different way to do this? So I had to go find out, was there? And I found an organization that had protocols for how to remove these fillings safely for the patient and for the practitioner both. And the dentist, the dental assistant sitting next to you, and the receptionist sitting in the front that's breathing everything coming through the HVAC system, and all the above. There were actually protocols. Didn't even know they existed. Had never heard of it before. So I started implementing them, and it's everything from giant vacuums that we put at the base of the chin to try to suck those vapors away, to covering the face and the skin, and oxygen masks on the nose, and a lot of different things. So when I would walk in this crazy mercury filtration mask, a patient would obviously notice something was a little different. So
Yeah.
they started asking me, okay, so what's up around here? And as we started covering them and, doing it, so they were, a very small few were like, I don't really think I'm interested. The large majority said, well, this is going to be better for me too, right? Yeah, actually, this is going to be really, this is going to be a lot better for you too. So they were very intrigued, very interested, and started sending me to doctors and other practitioners that might be also interested, started sending their friends and family who might be interested in the safer way of doing it. And really, those were the people that started teaching me, because they would start to come, doctors or patients, and would say, well, I've also heard that maybe there's concern with fluoride. What do you know about that? Or
Mm,
what about
I've
root
heard the
canal?
same.
Yeah, what about root canals? What do you know there? And I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about any of it, because this was not mainstream dentistry. This was not what I'd been trained in. I'd not been trained to question, any of the above. And so I had to start really learning. And as I started learning, I realized, oh my goodness, what did I not know? And I'm a questioner. If I don't have an answer, I'm going to keep asking questions. And so I did. And I found an entirely different, basically just way of even thinking about the mouth and how it affects the rest of the body. And now I've come to find out 60 to 80% of chronic disease is related to the mouth in some way.
Mm.
So that's the way we practice. We have now a multi-specialty practice where we have patients flying from around the world that come, and we help with chronic disease and other issues, and entirely different pathway than I ever thought I would be on. But there is a huge piece here that needs to be talked about that no one's talking about, and dentists don't know it either. I know this personally because I didn't. And this is it's just really important information. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Yeah, I mean, there is a wealth of knowledge in there that, yeah, I would love to deep dive into now. So, okay, so you learned about mercury poisoning and you kind of went through some of those symptoms that, and I assume too that, I mean, some of those symptoms are probably more in extreme case since you had such a high level, where I'm assuming that I've heard that heavy metals can also affect us maybe at a much lesser amount if we have maybe not as high of a toxic exposure to it. And so I assume then there's probably maybe less diagnosed heavy metal symptoms out there that are probably not really being accounted for. And like you said, I've kind of been interested in heavy metals just in general because I know it comes in all sorts of environmental exposures, even if we're not kind of consuming plants that I know have some of that in there that I've tested for. So now, once you found out you had heavy metal mercury poisoning, you started kind of, say, remediating or taking care of the additional exposure you were getting into. What did you do about, the heavy metals that were already in your system?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, because mercury in particular doesn't leave nicely or easily. It actually goes and hides out in a lot of organ systems, and a lot of heavy metals do the same thing.
Mm.
So it's not as easy as just taking a simple blood test and going, okay, what heavy metals are hanging around, because they don't circulate. That's part of the challenge, actually, even with
Mm.
diagnosis, because they're not just hanging around and circulating through the bloodstream easily. So you take a quick little blood test or a quick little urine test, because if they're in your urine, it means they're leaving. Well, the heavy metals we're concerned about are the ones that are staying, the ones that are hanging out and in our brains and our kidneys and these other systems. So you have to first of all diagnose or get an accurate lab test. So the way you do that is sometimes with blood levels. Some heavy metals are circulating in the blood, so you can find them in blood levels. But a lot of times you have to do something called a provocation test.
Mm.
So you have to take an element or a product called a chelator, which actually pulls things out of those organs. So it pulls it out of your brain, it pulls it out of your kidneys, and puts it into circulation. So you then can do a urine test or a blood test. Does that make sense?
Yep.
not just always floating around ready for you to find it. It has to actually be pulled out of the system. So you need to work with a functional medicine practitioner to find out, okay, how do we pull this out and accurately test? So you're right, the levels may be low, but they may be low in circulation and high actually hiding out somewhere else. So that's the first step is you have to actually accurately test what do I have going on. The second thing you have to do is think, okay, so if I had to work that hard to test it, I'm going to have to work kind of hard to get them out as well, right? Because they're not just freely circulating. All right, let's just pee them out. That's just not how this works. So you have to do something called a chelator. And there's different genetic variations in all of our systems that
Hmm.
allow us to pull easier or store more, our bodies to recognize these more. So I have a genetic variant called MTHFR, and it's actually been found that this could be in up to a third of the population. So a lot of people who are struggling with some of these toxicities, it's because their body can't tag these heavy metals properly. It's really interesting because you talk about botanicals and the concern about these metals coming in through botanicals. But the really cool thing about botanicals, about the way that the earth creates things and the way that the earth grows things, is a lot of times in a whole plant, you actually have cofactors that come along with those metals because metals are naturally occurring in the soil. That's just where they come from, right?
Yep.
So you have cofactors that are in those plants that, when used in their whole form, the cofactor allows that metal to be bound and excreted.
Hmm.
So when you
Okay.
use something in its whole food form, the body actually knows, and this is my whole book was about basically how we utilize nature the right way to be able to allow our cells to function as they should. This is a big component of this. So if you're using the botanicals that you're using in whole food form or in whole plant form, you're freeze drying or dehydrating, whatever it is, then those cofactors should actually be there naturally in order for you to excrete them naturally. Isn't that
Wow,
cool?
that's great news. Yeah,
Amazing
absolutely.
how nature works. So the problem is when they're extracted. When things are
Hmm.
extracted and taken out of that whole food context or whole plant context, then those cofactors typically don't go along with them. So now we're having more. This is where you get it from fillings. This is where you get it from the water, right? Mercury in the water or mercury in fish or mercury in these other areas, or the same with lead. A lot of times, lead is a real concern for people, and it's coming in a lot of packaged products because, for example, this is a really interesting one. I work with another product producer that she only uses fruit powders for flavoring, which
Hmm.
sounds great, right? Sounds awesome.
Yep.
Let's use flavors instead of, or fruit powders instead of natural flavors, which actually aren't natural at all. So she's really, really, committed to using only fresh fruit powders for her flavoring. Well, guess what is in fresh fruit? Lead, because lead comes from the soil. So the problem is when you've extracted just that fresh fruit powder, you're not using it in a whole form. You've eliminated the cofactor along with it, so the body actually isn't able to dump it as easily. So this is the problem with a lot of the heavy metals. They're coming in through packaged and processed foods, not in their whole food source. So if you're just eating food and botanicals, using them as medicine, but using them in their complete, the way that they show up in nature, nature actually has your back, has a way for you to get rid of it.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great news. Yeah, so I mean, our ETHA Kratom flagship product, the one that kind of started the company, is a whole leaf tablet. So we take the whole leaf Kratom, grind it into a powder, and press it into a tablet with no binders, fillers, or additives. So it's 100% as almost as natural as it can be. So that's great news. That is my favorite product that I use on mostly a daily basis when I have my chronic pain issues. And so, but these cofactors, are there certain types of plants that have, say, more of them? Or, if I'm concerned about, okay, so at least with the kratom, I'm using it in whole leaf form, but I'm still, say, exposed to other heavy metals due to my environment, or I do like metal working or other,
Yep.
industrial operations. Are there other plants that I should be considering eating to kind of help with that?
Right question. I love your question because this is the exact way you should be thinking about it. Going, okay, so if other things have those exact cofactors, so what could I take that's also plant-based, that's also a whole plant that could help to bind the things that you're getting from other sources? Exactly right. And the nice thing is chlorella is a
Mm.
single cell, organism. It's fabulous actually for this. So chlorella is a really great plant to take that's a very, very good binder for these kinds of heavy metals. So I am a huge believer, and it's interesting because of my genetic variant. Like I said, it's about a third of the population does this as well. We hold on to toxins more, and our body can't tag them properly, so we have a real hard time getting rid of them. If I use a real strong binder, so there's one called Cyto Detox, and the way that you're supposed to use it, it's one that actually pulls things from cells and gets them ready to get rid of them. The problem is I started using it just regular dosage. Sorry, my dog's shaking. I'll back up for a second. So I started using it at just regular dosage and I got deathly ill. I got so sick. I couldn't eat like I dropped like 15 pounds in a week. I mean,
Wow.
I was so ill. And so I realized my body cannot detox that rapidly. It just can't do it because it just doesn't have the mechanisms genetically to be able to tag things properly and do that well. So chlorella is actually my best friend. Cilantro is another. So
Mm,
chlorella and cilantro are two really slow chelators or slow binders. So they're going to grab things in a slow, methodical way and escort them out of your system nicely. I don't get sick when I do that. So again, it kind of backs up to the way nature does this. How does nature do it? Well, cilantro, chlorella, they already have these natural chelators in them. It's going to be a slower process. And it took me about 8 years before I felt like I had my brain back. And I'm not necessarily telling everybody that that has to take 8 years, but it's okay to go a little slower. Otherwise, your body falls into this huge detox just mess where
mm,
everything's moving out too quickly and nothing can. Sorry, I don't know why I'm beeping here too. But everything moves out too quickly, nothing balances well and you just feel
mm.
terrible. So I am a really big believer that if you feel like you're getting metals from other things in life, just take chlorella, basically daily, and cilantro. Add it to as many foods as you like. Those two things right there will help as long or as well as just using whole foods as much as
Excellent.
whole foods and food. Whole foods is medicine. Just use whole foods, and then you're going to get a lot of those cofactors naturally too.
Yeah, I mean that's on this show we talk a lot about holistic health where a lot of several small activities adding together has a much more beneficial outcome than trying to isolate a single activity or in the medical industry they typically want to try to isolate to a single drug molecule and that is going to be the fix all where it really takes this entourage of a lot of practices together. And so, but I guess when you say chlorella, can you give us an idea of how much I should consume, or what you'd recommend on what kind of that range may be?
And you know what? Honestly, it's a little bit personal. So
Mm,
you start with getting a chlorella supplement, a chlorella powder, whatever it might be, and you start using it kind of as it says on the bottle. And you go, how do I feel? Was that too fast? Do you think I could speed that up a little bit? So really, it's not going to be, there's no toxic dose of chlorella, if that makes sense. It's just how fast can your body get rid of things. So if you're feeling fine, 1.5 times the dosage. How do you feel? If you're feeling fine, double the dosage. How do you feel? So you're going to measure it a little bit on just your symptomology. How am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling a little, it's called Herxheimer's reaction, where your body's detoxing too quickly. You get kind of
mm.
sweaty. You kind of just feel fluish almost. If you're starting to see any of those symptoms, you back the dosage down. So this is something you're going to self-dose based on how you feel using it.
Okay. And I guess that's kind of what you talk about, because we always kind of hear about listening to our bodies and kind of that, or like being maybe more mindful. Because I mean, I also like to say that humans, it's amazing that we can adapt to anything. And so like it's one of our best traits, but then it also kind of can be a negative trait where if I put myself in a negative environment, my body will adapt to it, at least to, for a certain extent, maybe several years, or I kind of go down this path and I don't necessarily realize how much stress I'm putting on my body because our bodies can be great at adapting until it's not.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
not only that, but sometimes we ignore we ignore it because we are adapting.
yeah.
You just get so used to, I talk to people all the time about their sleep quality. And I'll say, how do you sleep? And they're like, well, I sleep great. And then we'll start talking about it. And well, how often do you wake up at night? Oh, only like 3 or 4 times. How long does it take you to go to sleep? Oh, like 45 minutes. I'm like, that is not great sleep. But nobody else knows how anyone else sleeps. So it's our adaptation. It becomes our norm. All of a sudden, we're ignoring all those symptoms and signals because that's just the way we sleep. So sometimes it's a matter of really looking at those adaptations too and saying, Is that making me ignore the true signals and symptoms that my cells are trying to give me right now because I've just become accustomed to it? Is it really living well? Is it really true health?
Yeah, okay. And so maybe on that, listening to our bodies, I think kind of what you're saying is instead of just looking at a broad category, maybe breaking that category like sleep down into more specific factors and then comparing that maybe to other people and kind of getting a better understanding. Is my pattern or my general understanding of reality, is that like similar to others? And so is that kind of what we mean by listening to our bodies, or do you have other techniques how I can maybe question myself and get a better answer?
Yeah, good question. So it's interesting because when I was in this health journey of my own, I am very much a researcher. I like to go and study things out. And so I started studying all kinds of different health methodologies. Chinese medicine, Chinese traditional medicine, Ayurveda from India, looking at all these, plant medicines and all these things and traditional medical methodologies that have been used for thousands of years throughout the world. And I was fascinated with all of them. And I started thinking, okay, I need to incorporate all of these things into my life. And I got so overwhelmed. And
Mm.
that's honestly what we have in today's world is we don't have a lack of information. We have plenty of information at our fingertips at all times. What we have is a lack of clarity on what they all mean for our bodies. So I looked at all of those different methodologies and they actually all use the elements of the earth and the seasons of the earth to determine what do our symptoms mean? What do the things that we're experiencing actually tell us? And they were all fascinating and fabulous, but they were all like I don't speak Chinese. And I don't, if I tell you, oh, in Ayurveda methodology, my dosha is Pitta. Well, it doesn't really tell you anything about me. And I can't really go, oh, then that means I should do this. So what I did is I took all of those methodologies and I created this enormous database and I cycled it down to what I call a seasons methodology. So, for example, if you come to me and you say, you know what, I just feel kind of stuck in my life right now. Like, I just don't feel like I want to move forward. I have no motivation. I'm sitting on the couch a lot. I feel bloated. I'm constipated. I'm just kind of headachy all the time. Like, if you come and tell me those symptoms, I'm going to say, you know what? You are in the season of spring, and your liver and gallbladder are trying to tell you something. Your liver and
Mm.
gallbladder are what needs help first. So, I put this into an assessment. So basically, what you do is you just plug your symptoms in. So you go through, it's a big symptoms assessment and you just click on it. You just go, yep, 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 no, no, no. Whatever it is, these are the symptoms I have. And it then tells you which organs need help first.
Wow.
You actually can translate what your cells are telling you because your cells know how to keep you well. So, my favorite example is talking about, let's say you cut your finger. If you cut your finger, you might put a band aid on it, right? Put a band-aid
Yep.
on, clean, keep it, I'll keep the skin together. But does the band-aid actually do the healing?
Nope.
No. So what's actually doing the healing in that situation?
I mean, our own body.
Correct. It's your cells, right? And the amazing thing about it is they do it without you telling it what to do. I mean, you didn't have
Absolutely.
to tell your immune cells to go and say, okay, guys, we got trouble over here. Let's bring
Right.
in all the guys to clean up the mess. And, that's why it gets red, swollen, and sore.
Yeah.
And that's the immune system. And then once it's cleaned up, then the body says, all right, done with the immune system. Now let's go on construction mode. So we're going to stitch those skin cells together in a way that they can't separate again. You didn't have to tell it to do any of that. So your cells know what to do to keep you well. So really, when we're asking what kind of medicine should we use, that's actually the wrong question. The right question is, what do my cells need to do the job they already know how to do?
Yeah. It's
That
a fantastic approach.
is what are your cells telling you? And that is the only way they can communicate with us is through our symptoms, right?
Mm.
So when you had these back issues, your pain was your cells telling you something trouble. There's big time trouble going on down here, boys. You need to sit up and pay attention. What's happening down here? So your cells were telling you something. And I always encourage people, of course, you want the pain relief. Absolutely. But you also have to say, and I know you are because you said physical therapy, you said all these exercises you're doing, you also have to say, okay, I'm not just going to quiet the symptom. That's like putting duct tape over the front of the indicator light on your car dashboard. The problem didn't go away, you just can't see it anymore. Well,
Yep.
just taking care of pain relief or covering over a symptom, taking ibuprofen for a headache, these are just covering over your cell's only way of talking to you. So sure, we need to have some relief, but we also need to step back and say, what is that cell trying to tell me? And that's what this assessment does, is it's literally like the Google Translate for your cell symptoms to say, okay, this is what your cells are telling you. What does it mean they need from you? And that's the important piece, because your cells can do their job if you simply get on board with them and give them what they need.
It's amazing. And this assessment, I can find it at
Yep.
livingwellwithdrmichelle.com.
You can even take a
Excellent.
shortcut and go to livingwellbook.com. Livingwellbook.com, and it is in the book, Living Well with Dr. Michelle. And it really is, I believe, the starting point for any health journey, because you
That's
have to
amazing.
figure out where to start. What
Yeah,
cells need help first? You can't help them all at the same time. What cells need help first? And that basically tells you where to start. And then I also tell you what to do about it.
that's
The
fantastic.
cells are saying this, what do you then do? So that's really important also.
Okay, so yeah, I'm very excited to take an assessment when I have my symptoms. I'll go to livingwellbook.com or livingwellwithdrmichelle.com.
Yep.
So I wanted to kind of maybe go back to you were saying that, as you went into this new journey of understanding the dentistry and maybe more of a, say, biologic or holistic dentistry approach, you started to realize how important the mouth is, and that I think you said about 80% of a lot of diseases come from the mouth.
Yeah.
Can you maybe kind of talk more about that and maybe also where I think you also said, or in your book, you mentioned that oxygen is a really important part of this?
Yep. Yep. So there's the big three that I call them, that really are the influences on the body from the mouth. And the first one is metals that we already talked about. Not only mercury, but there's also a lot of other metals in the mouth. There's titanium, dental implants, there's other things. And the issue with metals isn't just heavy metal overload, which is a problem actually. Any silver filling that's in anyone's mouth right now is 50% mercury. And that mercury is released from those fillings 24/7. I can now tell you that without losing my license. So, but it's actually extremely important that if you're choosing to have them removed, because you might have low level neurotoxin symptoms like mercury will give you, it's very, very important that you remove those safely, because it's actually worse just to remove them with any old dentist, and you're going to be breathing it all in. You're going to get a whole big load of mercury. It's just going to move to a new neighborhood. So don't do it unsafely. I'd rather you leave them in your mouth than do it unsafely. So you can find a dentist who can do that kind of safe removal at two different places. First of all, on my website, Living Well with Dr. Michelle, we have a dentist directory of dentists that we have vetted. It's free. You just go find somebody that's in your neck of the woods, and they not only do these mercury removal appointments, but they also will do some of the other things we're going to talk about here shortly. But there's another site called IAOMT. I'll say that again, IAOMT.org. That is the organization that I found that had created these protocols for safe mercury removal. And so they have an enormous directory on their website of dentists that are either accredited in this, or at least, have been trained in this, that you can find somewhere close to you. So don't get the fillings removed unless you go to one of those dentists, somebody that's doing this safely. Super important. So that's number one, is metals. The other issue with metals, I'll just briefly touch on it, but interestingly enough, metals conduct electricity, right? We
Mm.
know that that's why metals are in our wiring and everything else, through our homes and things. And metals also will conduct frequencies. So this is also why we use metals and things that, we want to transmit, and antennas and, whatever this, because they'll go along the metal. Well, if you have titanium in your body, and it might be in your mouth in a dental implant, but it also maybe a knee or a hip or a shoulder, any of those things are all metal. Frequencies surrounding us nowadays are everywhere. This is Wi-Fi. This is cell frequencies. This is 4G, 5G, all these things. They're just simply wavelengths of energy like this that pass through the air. We can't see them because they're not in the visible light spectrum. So if we could see every bit of energy in our air, we actually wouldn't be able to see, because they would cloud everything so much. If we could see ultraviolet, if we could see infrared, if we could see EMFs, like we wouldn't be able to see. So all we can see are the visible frequencies, but we're surrounded by other frequencies. Well, those frequencies heat up metal. This is why you can't put a metal pan in a microwave, because it heats up that metal. So it heats up the metal. So what it's doing is 5G, 4G, these frequencies, they actually heat the metal up, and they're starting to melt the bone around these metal body parts that we're putting in. So knees, hips, shoulders. Yep. So knees, hips, shoulders, and dental implants. We're seeing a huge increase in dental implants failing. And of course, dentists are blaming it on people just aren't taking care of their dental implants. Let's blaming it on plaque and home care and cement and whatever else it might be. But I'm saying, no, guys, this is frequencies. We're surrounded by them, and now the metal is heating up. So it's not that we're allergic to it or any problem like that. It's that it simply gets warm and it literally melts the bone around it. So we use zirconia, which is completely
Mm.
ceramic dental implants when we're doing any kind of dental restoration. If you losing a tooth, we replace it with ceramic so that we don't have to worry about the heat. So then that brings into the next number, the number two of the big guys, which is hidden dental infections. So this is old root canals, huge one people don't understand, areas where teeth were removed. And a lot of times people will say, well, I've not lost a tooth. How about a wisdom tooth? The most common place that we find these hidden infections is where wisdom teeth have been removed. And then gum infection, which actually about 70% of the adult population has some degree of gum disease. So huge infection potential in the mouth. And anytime you have infection in your mouth, that compromises your immune strength. So now your immune system is dealing with this instead of dealing with what else it should be dealing with, even things like cancer. And so there is literally a 2 times increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, cancer if you have one tooth that has a root canal in your mouth. If you have an area where you had a tooth removed that didn't heal properly. I mean, these numbers are real and they're enormous. So that's number two. We can dig a little bit more into that one. But number three, just so we know, is the airway piece you talked about. It's the sleep and oxygen and airway, and it does have a lot to do with the dentist. So those are the big three. And if you want, we can kind of lean into this infection for a second, because I'm
Yep,
sure
that'd be great.
there. So what questions do you have around this? Well, a
Yeah.
lot of times people want to know, why would a root canal be a problem, right?
Well, yes. I think you explained that, okay, if we have an infection, whether it's gum disease or a root canal, something that's kind of a hidden infection, now our immune system is really, maybe not distracted, but it's doing its job trying to combat that infection, which then means we don't have the resources for our immune system to tackle other important aspects. So, what can I do, or how would I know that I have, say, an oral infection, and what can I do about it?
Yep. So gum disease is actually easy to detect. We do it at pretty much every time you come in for a cleaning. The hygienist goes and measures, and you hear 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, whatever it is. What are we measuring? We're measuring if there has been bone loss due to infection. So we're kind of measuring past history, right? We're measuring something that was already lost. But we also are looking for bleeding gums. You can look for that in your, if you're brushing your teeth and you're spitting out blood in the sink, there's some gum disease somewhere in your mouth. So go and have that addressed. And it's actually the easiest one to treat, just because it's in the dental office. We're accustomed to treating it. So go and get your gums measured, see what's happened in the past, but also currently, and make sure that you don't have active gum infection. Literally, as you're swallowing, every single swallow, you're swallowing bacteria if you have active gum disease. And
Mm.
not only that, but you're passing it on with every kiss, every shared drink, everything. This is a transmissible infection. So go make sure you're not sharing this with somebody else. The next one is root canals. People often say, well, I thought a root canal was like done. Once I've had a root canal, there isn't any infection anymore. Like, I had an infection and that's why I got my root canal. The problem is the anatomy of a tooth. When a root canal is done, we remove the main nerve on the inside of the root, of each root, because sometimes molars have 3 to 4 roots in them. So we remove the main nerve, the main blood vessel, disinfect it, and then fill it up with a rubbery like material. So basically kind of entomb the tooth in your mouth. It's no longer alive. There's no longer any blood flow. There's no longer any sensation. This is why it doesn't hurt. You get a root canal, it's like, it's awesome. Pain's gone. Right, because we took the nerve out. The trouble is that's not all that's in a tooth. There's the main nerve and blood vessel channel, but there's little feeder channels. This is why when you tap on your tooth, you feel it,
Mm.
because there's little nerve extensions that go all the way from the main channel all the way to the outside of the tooth. This is why we could talk about nutrition and how it affects whether you get cavities or not. Why? Because the nutrients on the inside of the body go through those main canals and through all the little nutrient channels and keep your tooth healthy. Those little nutrient channels are too small to clean and too small to fill. So you always have dead nerve tissue and blood vessel tissue left in a tooth that you've had a root canal on, no matter how well it was done. There's always dead tissue left in the tooth. Well, we don't do this in any other area in the body. I always joke, let's say you had a gallbladder attack tomorrow and you went into the doctor and they said, oh, we got to take the gallbladder out. But don't worry, we're going to take it out. We're going to clean it up, disinfect it really good, fill it up with this plastic-like stuff and shove it back in your body. It's not really going to do anything, but it's not going to hurt. And would we think it was going to be okay?
No, of course not.
No, bacteria are going to find it. That's why they don't have, like, if you have gangrene on a toe, they're chopping the toe off because that the blood, if there's no blood flow to something, then bacteria will find it. They will find the dead tissue, and without the blood flow, your immune system can't fight it. So what
Mhm.
ends up happening is you get bacterial growth around the end of the tooth. No antibiotic can treat this because an antibiotic goes through the bloodstream. And remember, this is dead tissue inside the tooth. Nothing can get there. It's entombed in there now. So an antibiotic can't treat it and it never goes away. So this is a nonstop 24/7 insult to the immune system. And the crazy thing is we can't see it on a dental x-ray often. If it gets huge, we can't. But what we have to use is something called a cone beam CT scan. So one of my very favorite examples is a woman that came in, she had a root canal years ago. And like people often do this, like kind of tap on it. They go, it doesn't hurt. I don't know, it just feels kind of a little odd. Those are like the really common words that I hear. So she said, I don't know. Can you take an x-ray of it? We took a regular dental x-ray, the kind that goes in your mouth, we snap it. And I looked at it and I said, it looks completely fine. But I had just gotten a brand new machine. It's called a cone beam CT scanner, and more dentists have them now. I had just gotten this. It allows me to see everything in 3 dimensions in your mouth. So I said, you know what? For the heck of it, let's just go take a scan. We went and took a scan. The exact same tooth I just said was perfectly fine. On the scan, pulled up, there was a quarter-size hole that had been eaten away in her jawbone above the root of the
Mhm.
tooth from bacteria spreading that I couldn't see. I couldn't
Wow.
see it on the regular dental x-ray. So now we take a cone beam CT scan on every single patient that comes in our practice, and every single day in our practice, we find, I don't know, at least a dozen failed root canals that have eaten holes in people's jawbones, have eaten holes through the bottom of people's sinuses, leading to chronic sinus infection, that are affecting ears, that are affecting jaw pain. I mean, on and on and on and on, that cannot be seen on a regular dental x-ray. So this is why root canals are problematic. So people will then say, well, what do I do now? If I've already had a root canal, like, what do I do? First of all, go get a cone beam CT scan. See, is your immune system keeping this, at bay? Where are things at? But a lot of people say, well, even if it's okay today, I don't want to risk that it's not going to be okay tomorrow and I won't feel it and it's going to compromise my health. So it's absolutely up to you at that point. You can redo the root canal, but redoing the root canal, actually, all they do is take the filling out and put it back in again. It doesn't solve
Mm.
the problem of the dead tissue. So the only solution is to remove the tooth, clean it up very, very thoroughly, get all the infection out of the jawbone, and then replace it with a ceramic dental implant, like I talked about. So I used to tell people, you know what? I will save your tooth at any cost. And that's what we're trained to do as a dentist. We'll save your teeth at any cost. Like we will save your teeth. And we would do things that we call jokingly herodontics. We would do these hero things, to save a tooth. And now I say, you know what? I will save your health at any cost, even if it means removing a tooth, because I can replace your tooth, or heaven, you can live without it. So many people live without your teeth. You don't actually, I mean, it's a tooth way in the back. You can live without a tooth more than you can live without your health. So make sure it's not a tooth that's impacting it. That's the huge connection with root canals and overall health concerns.
Okay. And then, so the last part you mentioned, I think, was the oxygen
Yep.
importance of our oral health. So, yeah, can you elaborate on what that means?
Yep. So every single cell, the energy production in our cells runs through our mitochondria. And the way it works is we feed it fuel. The favored fuel for energy is carbohydrates, fats second, proteins last. So this big protein craze, eating more protein does not give you more energy. Your body does not use protein for energy. It uses protein to build muscles. It uses protein to do energy, to do a lot of chemical reactions in the body. But so a molecule of fuel, carbs or fats preferably, can create, basically, I like to think of it like two batteries. So every
Mm.
time you take one of those, it creates two batteries. If you add oxygen to that molecule of fuel, the same fuel will create 34 batteries. I mean,
Yeah,
isn't
that's a big
it's
increase. Yeah.
like running 2 miles an hour versus 34 miles an hour, with the only increase being oxygen. Oxygen is absolutely crucial for every single function in our system, as well as our energy. So if you feel like you are dragging, oxygen is the thing you need most. So Where do you get it from? First of all, breathe. A lot of times we just stop. We don't think to breathe anymore. We're breathing like we breathe like this. That's not how we breathe. We breathe with our stomach. So all of us are sucking in our guts because we don't want to, and it's actually not allowing us to breathe like we should. Let that out. You let your diaphragm really open up and get a lot of oxygen in. It will increase your energy immediately. That's the one health hack that you can do right now while you're listening. Breathe. The second one is we say, can you actually get enough air from the nose and mouth to your lungs? That's the pipeline. Well, that pipeline is a tube that goes from the nose and mouth to the lungs, and it can be blocked by things in the mouth. This is what people often don't understand.
Hmm.
So, when you're snoring, if you lay back at night, so think about when you lay back at night. You lay back at night, gravity is now going to push what? It's going to push the tongue, the tissue at the back of the throat, the uvula, the soft palate. It's going to push it all back down into that tube that you're supposed to be breathing through. So if there's not enough space back there for air to pass, once all of that stuff falls back into the airway, you're going to snore because the air is going to pass that tissue and it's going to flap in the wind, basically. But you're also going to have a harder time getting to sleep because your body's going to say, no. Because when you relax, all that stuff falls back even further, and I can't breathe. So, you know what? I'm just not going to really let you go to sleep. Or
Hmm.
it's going to wake you up in the middle of the night and you wake up awake because you were suffocating literally at nighttime. And your body said, wake up, wake up, wake up. I'm not breathing here. And at nighttime, your body's regenerating. It's doing all its construction. That's when you need oxygen the most, even. So it will wake you up. It'll do all of these things to get you awake. The other thing you'll do is you'll clench your teeth because when you clench your teeth, it tightens up all of these muscles that hold the airway open. But
Hmm.
here's the catch 22. As soon as you clench your teeth, you are out of REM or deep sleep because you cannot engage a muscle and be in the deepest levels of sleep. So you end up waking up and you feel like, I swear I slept. Why do I feel like trash this morning? Because you were in light sleep all the time, never got into that regenerative deep sleep because you can't actually breathe when you're there. So, what does this have to do with the dentist? A lot of this has to do with a small mouth. If you have a small mouth or infection, if you have infection in the mouth, it'll swell all those tissues and make it worse. But
Hmm.
I liken this to a garage and a car. Let's say you have a big, long pickup truck and a teeny tiny garage. There's no way you're going to fit that whole pickup truck in the garage. So the end of it has to spill out into the driveway, right? Well, the driveway is the airway. So if you have a tiny mouth, if you have crooked teeth, if you had teeth removed for braces, if you have, crowding, if you have any of these things, if you have scalloping on the sides of your tongue, like the sides of your tongue kind of look scalloped on the edges, if you squeeze or clench your teeth, if you have worn teeth, these are all signs that you do not have enough room for the car in the garage. So your
Hmm.
tongue and your tissue doesn't fit inside of your mouth. So it has no choice but to spill back into the airway daytime and nighttime. You
Hmm.
just simply don't get the oxygen you need to be able to do what you need. So, what do we do as a dentist? We make the garage bigger. We
Hmm.
literally expand mouths. And you
Wow.
can't do this with adults. We do this with adults clear up into their 80s. We can use appliances in the mouth. Sometimes it's clear braces,
Yep.
sometimes it's regular braces, sometimes it's other expansion appliances. We use expand these appliances in the mouth to make the garage bigger so that there's plenty of room for your tissue, for your tongue, for everything to fit. Now we're seeing this more and more nowadays. And if you don't get enough oxygen at night, it's going to decrease your life expectancy by 20%. So if you were going to live to 90, you're going to live to 70 now. Just because of this, you're going to lose 20 years of your life. Are you okay with that? I'm certainly not okay with that. So the reason this is happening so much anymore is because the top jaw is the first bone affected by malnutrition. And
Hmm.
they're all chronically malnourished nowadays. Our food simply doesn't have the nutrients it used to have. This is why everybody needs braces. Everybody needs their wisdom teeth out. Why? Because there's no room for any of this anymore. If you look back at skulls 300 years ago, everybody had straight teeth and all their teeth.
Yeah.
What's going on? Our jaws aren't growing the same way. They're small, which means our lower jaws grow small, which means we don't have room. So I love to catch this in kiddos. If we can utilize their growth and development, help do that expansion process while they're still growing, oh, it's so fabulous. They don't even need braces. They end up correcting a lot of things like ADHD symptoms, which is honestly a lot of times an oxygen problem. They're just not
Yep.
getting oxygen. It's a growth factor problem, which you're not getting if you're not getting the oxygen you need. We love to correct things in children while they're growing, but we can also do it for an adult. We can go backwards. We can make things bigger in your mouth. We can make enough space. We can shrink up tissue in the back of the throat with lasers. We can do all sorts of things to make it so you actually get the oxygen you need so you can have the energy you want.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this sounds similar to, I believe I read a book called Breath by
Yep.
James
James
Nestor.
Nestor. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yep.
talked a lot about some of the kind of the chewing, making our mouth is maybe smaller now because we don't chew the same kind of foods we used to. And yeah, highlighted just how if we are not breathing through our nose, which is also releasing nitric oxide, that vasodilator to get more oxygen into our lungs, there's a lot of that effect that yeah, is very, very critical. And then,
Yep.
so I guess in addition to our cells needing that oxygen, there's, I guess, four things that our cells really need to stay and live well.
Yes. So every single cell needs supplies, which we've talked about that somewhat today. That's nutrients, that's the vitamins, that's all those kinds of things, that's oxygen. That's all the things that our cells actually need to do their work. They need support. And people don't often understand this one. They're like, support, what do you mean by that? Well, for example, your cells are like a city. And if your garbage removal system stopped tomorrow, how quickly would the streets be full of garbage?
Oh,
Really,
I mean,
really quickly, right? Yeah, I
done.
mean,
Yeah,
it'd be a
instantly.
huge mess within like weeks. It'd be like almost not traversable. So the same thing happens in our system. We have a lot of toxins and things that our body's working hard to get rid of but the trash system, the garbage system is a lymphatic system, and it actually doesn't
Mm.
go on its own. Our heart moves on its own. We have this big old pump and it pushes the blood around, but our lymphatic system doesn't. So we have to support it. So that's doing dry brushing. That's doing things like running or rebounding or exercising that actually moves the muscles and moves the lymph. So that's support. How do we help your cells to do what they need? The third one is security. So we do need to be protective, just like you talked about at the very beginning. You need to make sure that you're not getting in a lot of toxins, heavy metals, environmental things like pesticides, herbicides. How do you make sure, your body is good? Like it can deal with a lot, but it sure helps if you can like try to minimize that. So that's the security piece. And then signals. Your body has to actually be able to, your cells have to be able to talk to each other. And a lot of that has to do with oxygen and electrolytes, which a lot of people don't
Mm.
really understand. We just think of electrolytes as what we drink when we sweat it a lot. It's like that Gatorade in the Maverick or the gas station at the corner. It's not just that. Electrolytes actually carry electrons. That's why it's called an electrolyte. Electrons are what our cells toss around to each other to talk to each other. So the more electrolytes you have in the system, the better your cells talk, the better they work, the better you feel. So signals are very, very important as well.
Okay, so I guess we need the nutrients such as like the fats, sugars, proteins, and oxygen.
Yep.
We need to keep the security, so making sure we don't get a lot of toxins coming into our system that's kind of, taking up, causing problems with it.
Yep.
Then we also need to make sure that the, say, waste streams or the output of the cells is also healthy. And
Yep.
then lastly, we kind of need electrolyte signaling so our cells can communicate with each other and really kind of function. And we can also probably then learn or be aware of what is trying to tell us about ourselves.
You got it. And this sounds complex again, but it's really not. And the way I walk through it in the book is to say, okay, what cells need help first? Now, how can we give them those four things? Just
Excellent.
it makes it very, very systematic. This is where you start. This is what you do first. You're going to see results from literally change one because you're targeting the spot that needs the help first.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so I guess in addition to, you mentioned breathing is a really good, easy way for us to start getting more oxygen, start giving our cells a critical component that we need. Is there anything else, today that our listeners can start doing that will help get their energy back?
Yep. So oxygen for sure and electrolytes for sure, as well as the right kind of fuel. So I tell people, okay, you need to be thinking about an electrolyte as your fuel source. So you're not going to drink your caffeine at 2 p.m. when you're feeling sluggish because all your caffeine does is actually covers over your body's signal that it's getting tired. It's called the adenosine receptors and it just shuts it off. So instead of actually giving your body more energy or more fuel to do what you need, you just shut off the signal that it's tiring. So this is why you get the crash after caffeine because you pushed past your energy reserves and you go, you die. So you need instead to give your body more of what it needs, which is simply energy. So instead of that caffeine drink at 2 p.m., you do an electrolyte drink at 2 p.m. And people are like, well, but I didn't exercise. But did you do anything else that expended energy today? Well, yeah, I did a lot of other things. Exactly. How do you expect it to keep going unless you've refueled? So electrolyte. The other thing at 2 p.m. is an apple and a couple of dates.
Hmm.
Why? An apple and a couple of dates are complex carbohydrates. They're slow burn. They're not going to spike your blood sugar. They're not going to give you that, that insulin crash in 20 minutes. They're going to slowly give your cells exactly its preferred fuel. They love complex carbohydrates. Your energy is going to absolutely go up when you give your cells what they need, along with a nice oxygen break. So 2 p.m. is the perfect time for an electrolyte drink. Let's do 2 minutes of breathing to get some oxygen in there and eat an apple and a couple dates. And literally, your energy will be at different levels than you've experienced in a long time.
Excellent, excellent. Great advice. So, there's a lot more in your book. Is there anything else you would like to leave our listeners with, or anything we want to touch on before we close out this wonderful podcast?
I think it's just really important to always keep your mind open. And it's really interesting because as I speak with people, I remember speaking at an event and a woman kept just asking me, but should I use a probiotic? And I said, you are just asking the wrong question. I just need you to step back and say, what are my cells telling me? So instead of asking always, which product should I use? Which thing should I buy? Which diet program should I subscribe to? Which exercise program should I start? Wrong first question. The first question is, what are my cells saying? What are they telling me? What does this mean? And based on that information is where you will then decide, is this supplement, product, food, exercise, diet, what I need? But you've got to step back and start listening to your body. So for her example, I said, wrong question about probiotic. I need to know, what is your gut telling you right now? Well, I'm not digesting food. I'm always bloated. I say, great. That means you are in a spring season. That means we've got to start with your liver and your gallbladder. Because even if you start adding a probiotic, if your detox organs aren't working, it's just going to keep backing up. Doesn't matter. We've got to start where the symptom tells us to start. So start asking the right question. And my book will help guide you through what do you do once you found that answer.
Yep. And also that great assessment you have at livingwellbook.com.
Yep.
So, yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and gaining more insight into heavy metal toxicity and living well at a cellular level. If you want to learn more about the Cell Well model, please pick up a copy of Dr. Michelle Jorgensen's newest book, Living Well with Dr. Michelle, a comprehensive guide for optimal health and unlimited energy. If you found value in today's episode or simply enjoyed listening, we'd be grateful if you supported the show by visiting ETHANaturals.com for all of your natural botanical kratom needs. And as a special thanks to our guests, we have a coupon code LIVEWELL20 for 20% off all ETHA energy support products. Your support would really mean a lot to us. Don't forget to follow us on social media at ETHANaturals. If you have anything you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please submit your questions in the comments or Q&A section on wherever you are listening to us, or you can email us podcasts@ethanaturals.com. Until next time, I'm Alexander, and as always, live fully.